Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asato ma Satkamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So we begin today on verse number 50. That's on page 350. Sanjaya Vacha Ityarjunam Vasudevas Tathoktva Swakam Rupam Darshayamasa Bhuyaha Ashvasayamasa cha bhitamenam Bhutva punah saumya vapur mahatma. Sanjaya said, speaking thus to Arjuna, Vasudeva Krishna again showed his own form. The great soul again cheered up the frightened Arjuna, assuming his benign body. So we have seen when Krishna gave this great vision, the cosmic form, to Arjuna, that was not something that Arjuna was expecting. And we have seen how terrified he was. He was awestruck. Of course, if you have a sudden, any kind of a vision, we will be awestruck, especially it's a divine vision. And this was a huge thing. So he was awestruck, but also terrified, because it was a very terrible vision. And then he realizes that the person who he all along thought was his friend or a cousin was in fact someone really, someone very, very different from what he had thought. He saw that there's the same divine being in Krishna. But also, it was, as we have seen, it was very, very terrifying. And so he just says, please withdraw this form and let me see you in the form that I am accustomed to seeing. And we have seen on earlier occasion that it's not enough to want a spiritual experience. Well, as spiritual seekers, that's what we want, clearly. But if we are not ready for that experience, then that experience, instead of bringing us great joy and fulfillment, may even terrify us. And we might say, okay, that's great, but not now. I can't take it anymore. Sometimes too much of a good thing also, there is a limit to how much you can take. I mean, if you like chocolate ice cream, and then if a friend offers it to you, you'll be delighted because that's what you enjoy eating. And then you eat one, and the friends, would you like to have one more? I say, sure. And then you have a second one. And then by the time your friend brings you a fifth or a sixth one, then you probably have reached your limit by then. But if the friend says, no, you love it, you got to eat, and then you say, no more, I can't take it anymore. So our limits are reached, no matter how much wonderful a thing may be. So either our limit is reached, or we may not be just ready for it. And so what we can pray, as I think I mentioned this earlier as well, a more practical prayer, rather than seeking God's vision would be, God, make me fit to have your vision. Because if I become fit, then the vision will come. And when it will come, it will truly nourish me. But if I'm not fit, then the vision will come. I may not, first of all, I may not even know that it is a divine vision. If I know it, I may not understand it. Even if I understand it, it may not nourish me. So it's really doesn't help all that much. You might remember in Ramakrishna's life, there was this great incident that occurred on the 1st of January, because celebrated as a wish-fulfilling day. It's called the Kalpataru Day. So on that day, Ramakrishna attained this very high state of spiritual samadhi, absorption, and he started blessing everyone. Now that was the first time he had privately blessed many people, but this was kind of in the open, so to speak, because there were all these 30 or 40 people had gathered. It was after all a New Year day, and then he started blessing everyone. And as and when he touched, the people came and just fell at his feet. He touched their heads, blessed them, and then all of them had wonderful visions and wonderful experiences. That was great. There were a few instances as we read the follow-up, what happened after that. And there was this case of one person, his name was Vaishnav Charan. I think his name was Vaishnav Charan. Oh, sorry, not Vaishnav Charan. His name was Vaikuntanath. Vaikuntanath was one of the devotees, and he was present on that occasion, and Ramakrishna blessed him, and then his mind soared high. And then he had this vision. He started feeling the presence of the divine everywhere. And we might think, oh, that's great. How wonderful it will be if you and I also begin to see the divine everywhere. Maybe not. If we are not fit for it yet, if we are not ready for it yet, that kind of vision may be a burden rather than something we might enjoy doing. And that's what happened to this gentleman named Vaikuntanath. He goes home and he's just feeling the divine everywhere. So he's not able to do anything in a normal way as people do. He has to eat, he has to sleep, he has to talk with people, he has to go to work the next day. None of those things he could do it in a normal way because he's seeing God everywhere. After 3 days, he goes to Ramakrishna and says, well, this has been great, but please, could you just take it back? Can you believe it? When here is a person who had this great grace bestowed on him, seeing God everywhere, and he goes and asks that great experience to be withdrawn. Again, to stress the obvious really, that if we are not fit for it, we may not enjoy it all that much. And that's what happened in Arjuna's case here. And that's why we read, speaking thus to Arjuna, Vasudeva again showed him his own form, which is what Arjuna had requested him to do. The great soul again cheered up the frightened Arjuna, assuming his benign body. Verse 51. Arjuna uvacha Drishtvedam manusham rupam Tava saumyam janardana Idani masmi samvrittaha Sacheta prakritim gataha. Arjuna said, O Janardana, seeing this benign human form of yours, I have now become self-composed and come to normal state. So finally, Arjuna now is back to his normal being because Krishna is back to what Arjuna sees as his normal being. Now, what is the normal form of Krishna? Now, the word normal is an interesting word. And of course, there is a word abnormal, that which is different from the normal. Generally, we tend to use the word normal to what the majority does. So the majority of the people behave in a certain way, And then we say, well, that's normal for human beings to do. And if any deviation from that normal would be abnormal, the question is normal always good? Is the normal always right? If we go to a mental institution, then the majority are the people who are receiving treatment there. And there is, of course, the doctors and the medical staff, but they are in a minority. So now who is, according to our definition, who would be normal in an institution? So when we use the word normal, we're coming back to this normal life. Is this life normal? Is this experience, the human experience that we have, is this normal just because the majority of us have it? Or the experience that the mystics have had? They're just perceiving, feeling, dwelling in the divine consciousness, seeing the presence of God everywhere. Is that normal, or is our experience normal? Now, if we equate normal by meaning something real, something true, then it would seem that those few people, they are the normal ones. We are the insane ones. And sometimes in some of in Vedanta literature, some poems and songs, in fact, the world is referred to as an asylum, where people, so we are suffering from the disease of worldliness. A disease that, by worldliness is the word is used in spiritual texts. By worldliness means that this world that we encounter is so real to us that we cannot conceive of anything else which is not a part of this world to be real, at least as real as this world, if not more. So, if our notion of worldliness, if our notion of the world is limited to this material world that we encounter, and if we say, well, I don't think there's anything beyond this, then we are worldly. And I'm using the word in a technical sense, that world is the real for me. But if we at least grant the possibility that, yeah, sure, you cannot deny the reality of the world because that's our present experience, but at least we are willing to accept the possibility that there could be something real. I may not have seen it, I may not have experienced it, but how scientific it is for me to deny the reality of something which I'm not experiencing just because I have not experienced it. Because if those who believe in God cannot prove the existence of God, then those who deny God cannot prove the non-existence of God either. So in a sense, both are believers. Some people believe in the existence of God, and other people believe in the non-existence of God, and neither has proved it. On the other hand, those like Ramakrishna, Jesus, Buddha, who have actually broken through this barrier and who can truly say, yes, I have seen God. For them, the proof is their own experience. Other than these great ones, all the rest of us are believers. Some of us believe in God exists, some of us believe that God doesn't exist, that's all. What we want is not simply limit our spiritual life to a set of beliefs, but go beyond belief. Can we transform our beliefs into experience? And sometimes there's an intermediate step. Sometimes the belief might mature into conviction. It's still intellectual, it's still theoretical, you may not have experienced it yet, but you don't just kind of believe something exists or someone exists, but you somehow feel convinced. So sometimes this interim step does occur, kind of a deep, and sometimes the conviction may not be intellectual. It may not be something that you have read about it in books, or it's not cerebral, but there is this kind of a gut feeling. And although we might use the word I know, it's not a knowledge in the sense of a kind of a knowledge that comes from books. But sometimes people you might say, and sometimes you might feel it yourself. I know God exists. You have not experienced God. It's not just a kind of a hope, but you kind of deep down you know God exists. But if someone were to ask you, prove it, you have no proof. But you know deep down that there is something there. So there is this interim step. And oftentimes, that interim stage where we know something is there, but we haven't experienced it, is actually very helpful. It makes our spiritual practice meaningful. It's almost like it's what gives power to our practice. Because if you keep on doing your prayer and meditation with the idea, well, I'm praying to God, who knows whether God exists or not? Let me just do it anyway. Well, you can still pray that way, but that prayer won't have that force, that power, that intensity. That intensity will come when you know, yes, I'm praying to God. I know God is listening. I know that God will respond, but you have no proof for it. And that, when spiritual practice is done with that deep-seated faith, that deep-seated intense faith, it's then that time comes when that matures into experience. And once you have a direct experience, you don't need faith anymore. You don't need to believe anymore. It's like saying, I don't need to believe that this thing exists. I don't need to believe it because I'm seeing it. Right now, we need to believe in the existence of God because we are not really seeing God. But once we see, when we encounter that divine reality, belief or faith is no longer necessary. But it's a good, it's something that gives our spiritual life a meaning. That is why sometimes Vivekananda used to say, it's a very powerful statement. He said, it's good to be born in a church, but not to die there. In other words, we need the external supports for our spiritual life. And that's great. But all these supports are meant to help us become stronger and outgrow their need. So we can depend on external help, but when we become strong, then we no longer have to depend on them. And that's really what freedom means. Freedom means I'm not dependent on anything outside of me. I feel completely fulfilled. I feel that may not be the original way how the word fulfilled came, but if you want to kind of play on words, it means you feel full and you feel filled. Right now, we don't feel full. We feel incomplete. And because we feel incomplete, we need things from outside to fill us and to make us full. It's like this. We want things. There are material things that we need. And the consumeristic society in which we live, although all this, the main purpose behind all these advertisements and everything is to make you feel you don't have it and you need it. Unless you have this thing, your life is incomplete. And we get sucked into this kind of a consumerist thing. You see some brilliantly made ad, and then you say, oh, I must get it. Unless I get it, I can't be happy. So, and then of course, besides the material things, we also feel the need for love, understanding, friendship. There are so many things we get from the world outside, both material and non-material. And that fulfills us. Now, if we already were full, then we wouldn't need it. And so that's the idea. Once I become independent, then I don't depend on anything outside of me to get that sense of fulfillment. I already feel complete. So the journey, the word journey gets used too often nowadays, but the well, to continue with that word, journey, the journey is really from the sense of incompleteness that we all feel to being complete. Houston Smith, Professor Houston Smith once put it very beautifully. He said, all of us have a God-shaped hole in our heart. And because that hole is God-shaped, only God can fill it. We try to fill it up with all other things and nothing really fits there because it is God-shaped. Only God is God-shaped. And so that was, I think, very, very nicely put. Verse 52. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Sudurdarshamidam Rupam Drishtavanasi Yanmama Deva Apyasya Rupasya Nityam Darshana Kangshinaha. The Blessed Lord said, exceedingly difficult is it to see this form of mine that you have seen. Even the gods are ever eager to see this form. So Krishna now tells Arjuna that don't underestimate what you have been given. That you have seen something which no one else has been able to see so far. The word gods here, devaha, gods really mean celestial beings. By celestial beings, who are these celestial beings? Just like we are human beings living in this human world, the celestial beings are the beings living in the celestial world. Not to get caught up in these words, well, if this is a world which has been qualified by the adjective human, the world which, by human world I mean the world that human beings see, then the celestial world would be the world that celestials see. Now, who are these celestial beings and how different are they from human beings? If you see human beings, celestial beings, the word common there is beings. Beings mean people who exist. All of us are beings who exist. As beings, as long as we are in this human world, we are human beings. After we die, some of us will go to the celestial world. Then we will become celestial beings. So celestial beings is not some different species. It's just beings who are in that celestial realm. Those celestial beings sometime might come and be reborn here as human beings, and then they will become human beings. So let's understand, we are beings. And depending on whichever world we inhabit, we might have these different adjectives. And that's how in much of Indian mythology, there are these kind of classes of people described. That Gandharvas, there's like, and then you can translate it into English in different ways. But essentially, these are different beings inhabiting different worlds. And because there is this belief again, because it can't be proved, is the idea that we are reborn into different realms. Depending on the realm we are in, that's the name we will get. I mean, how long are we human beings? Okay, let's put it this way. Why, if we are all beings, what makes us human beings? And we have to say, well, it's a human body. We do not call a chimpanzee a human being, although they have more than 98% of their genes are identical with ours. Last weekend, when I was at the Parliament of Religions held in Salt Lake City, Jane Goodall, some of you may have heard of her. So she was at one of the panels, and so it was a very wonderful presentation she made. So that's why I'm just thinking of chimpanzees right now. But we say, what makes that being a chimpanzee, because that being who is in a chimpanzee's body now is a chimpanzee. We don't call it chimpanzee being, but that's really what it is. And so a being in the human body is a human being. Now, this human body has not been there all along. Clearly, this human body came into being when we were born. So we have been human being as long, depending on how old we are, that's how long we have been a human being. And how long am I going to remain a human being? As long as I'm in this human body. So, in one of the ways of understanding what Vedanta wants us to be is, can we just shed the adjective? Can we just, we are just beings. If we can just be, not be this or be that, just be, then the problem is solved. Right now, we don't just exist. We exist as human beings. In other words, our human identity, we are identified with our human form, our human appearance, our human, well, the human baggage, so to speak. Well, what makes us human? The human body, the mind, the ego, all of these things we have taken upon ourselves. That is why we are human beings. Think about it this way. An actor, let's say if you are acting in a movie or acting in a play, say Broadway, you are acting in some play, and so you're playing the role of some character, and then you put on the makeup, you put on the dress. So as long as you are in that play, let's say I'm playing the role of a king in a movie or a play. So I try to think of myself, if I'm a good actor, then I will just kind of get under the skin of that role, so to speak. And I will just, as long as that play lasts, I'm just going to think of myself as a king. They sometimes call them method actors, that you kind of immerse yourself into the character that you're playing. But you are not that. At the end of the play, you don't go home and start acting like a king. Nobody, your family is not going to treat you like a king. You just have to, at the end of the play, you just remove your makeup, you just go, and then you are who you are. Exactly in the same way, if we remember that this is not who we are, that we are all acting in this big cosmic play, and each of us is playing the role of a human being, and within that, all of us have our own life story. So whatever we see as my life story is the character that we are playing. As long as we enjoy playing this, we have become so good actors that we have even forgotten that we are playing the role. We kind of have begun to think, well, this is who I am. As long as I think this is who I am, the Broadway play would end after 90 minutes or 2 hours. This can go on and on and on. This will end only when I remember, I'm just tired of playing this role. Now I just want to go. I mean, who enjoys a movie more? Who enjoys a play more? Clearly, of course, the actors have those who are acting will enjoy it, no doubt. But those who are just sitting and watching the play, they will enjoy it much more than those who are acting. So while we may enjoy this life, and of course, some of the parts may not be so enjoyable when there is pain and heartbreak and all of that, but those who are watching the play, and these are these great mystics, these people whom we see as enlightened, they have just said, okay, I'm not going to act anymore. I'm just going to sit and watch this cosmic play. So they have become truly, they just are. They are not this or that. So that, we could say, is one way of understanding the Vedantic goal. That as long as we identify as human beings, as long as I think I'm a human being, I cannot become a divine being. In order for me to recognize that my real nature is divine, I have to stop being human. I can't be well, put it this way. If you remember the rope and snake analogy, a rope which is mistaken for a snake in a dimly lit room. Now that example we normally see from a third person's point, that here is this rope and I mistake it for a snake. Now, imagine that you are the rope. You are not standing outside watching the rope. You are the rope. And you have forgotten that you are a rope. And you have begun to see that you are a snake. So as long as you see that you are the snake, you will not know that you are the rope. So in order for that rope to become rope again, the rope has to say, I'm not the snake, I'm not the snake, I'm not the snake. And then finally say, then I say, yes, I'm the rope. But that's what Vedanta asks us to do. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the ego. And you kind of remove all these false notions, and then I see I'm the spirit. So that's the thing that we kept in mind. Now, why is this vision that Arjuna had so rare? Why is it that these even celestial beings or any beings anywhere in this vast universe, why do they find it difficult to have this divine vision? That is explained in verse 53. Naham vedair na tapasa na dane na chejjaya shakya evam vidho drashtum drishtavanasi mam yatha. Neither by the Vedas, nor by austerities, nor by gifts, nor by sacrifice am I visible in this form as you have seen me. So Krishna tells Arjuna, the way you have seen me, this experience cannot be received no matter how much scriptural study you do, including the study of the Gita, nor by austerities. Sometimes people do a lot of austerities thinking that, this is what I will attain God this way. Nor by gifts. Again, sometimes we think if I can give gifts, help the needy, do charity, serve people, maybe even give gift to God. Sometimes we think if we just bribe God into it, go and make some big donation to a church or a temple and say, then God will be pleased with me. So no, not by sacrifices, not by doing any of the rituals. By none of these things in themselves is it possible to have the vision. And yet, we see that many religious practices do involve, we are encouraged to study the scriptures. Austerity can be very helpful. Helping those in need, the spirit of selfless service can be helpful. All of these things can be helpful. Can be, that word can be is important because in themselves, they may not help if not done in a proper way. It's possible to do study of the scriptures, and rather than it enlightening me, and rather than it removing my doubts and questions, it might even increase my ego. I'm thinking, what a great scholar I am. I can defeat anyone in any argument. Same other things also. By helping the needy, it can purify our heart, no doubt about it. But it can also make me more egoistic. What a great charitable person I am. Even humility can increase our ego. No one is as humble as I am. You see, all of these things apparently are wonderful things, but if not done in a proper way, these things will not produce the desired results. How then can I attain to the vision of God? Krishna describes it in verse 54. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakya Ahamevam vidhorjuna. Jnatum drashtum cha tatvena. Praveshtum cha parantapa. But by undivided devotion, O Arjuna, can I in this form be known and realized in truth and entered into, O scorcher of foes. So this is a very, very important verse. Ananya bhaktya, undivided devotion. Devotion to God is great, but the adjective undivided is important. Has my devotion to God been divided? As spiritual seekers, we might say, well, I love God. That's great. Is my love for God divided? And in all honesty, we have got to admit that the love is divided. I love God, but then I love ice cream too. So we love a lot of other things besides God. And if it's divided, then you cannot enter into, it's a little bit like this. Although it's not so much necessary in these days and in this generation, how many of you have tried putting the thread into the eye of a needle? How many of you have even tried doing it? And how many of you are good at it? So good. So you see, and one thing, even whatever attempts we have made, one thing is clear, that thread has to be one-pointed. If it's divided, we cannot enter the eye of the needle. Right now, our love for God is not in question. Sure, we love God, but has that love has got these different strands? And which is why then we cannot enter into God because it's got divided. Now, would this mean that I stop loving everything else and only love God? Yes and no. Yes, because I should only love God. And no, because if I keep on seeing things other than God as not God, then I've already divided God himself or herself. And so it's not that I stop loving others, but wherever my love flows, if I can see the presence of God there. So if I can remind myself that God is not someone just sitting in a place of worship or sitting above the clouds, that wherever I see, it's the manifestation of the divine. That God is present in the person in front of me. We often forget this. Many of us, when we go to a place of worship, then we are all wonderful. We are all great. We have reverence. We have love. We have all the wonderful quality necessary when we know we are in a sacred place. But we don't always have the same feeling, the same attitude when you go out to do your work, or when you go shopping, or when you're driving. Now, if I try to remember, if it's true, but the thing is, we don't recognize the contradiction. We often say, well, God is everywhere. God is omnipresent. Well, omnipresent means God is everywhere. If God is everywhere, then God is there in the person in front of me as well. Then if I'm able to at least remember, although you don't need to tell that person that you are seeing God in that person, but you can remember that there is God in this person. Then the way we relate ourselves to the world, the way we relate ourselves to other people will change. That doesn't mean that you're just going to do worship everyone. There will be times, there will be occasion, if a child or a student is naughty or does some mischief, maybe the parents or the teacher may have to scold them. And we might say, well, if I see God, then it will be very difficult to scold God. Maybe not. If God chooses to play the role of a naughty kid, then a good scolding might be the right form of worship at that time. So depending on whichever way God chooses to come, it's like if a God chooses to come in the form of a patient, a doctor who is a Vedanta student, and says, here is a patient who has come, and I say, well, here is now God come to me in the form of this suffering human being. And so that time I don't have to say, oh, you are God. I don't have to tell that to the patient. I don't have to, but deep down I know this is the form the divine being has taken, and I must deal with this divine in a way that is appropriate. So there is a natural reverence for life, respect for everything that we see will come. In the life of Holy Mother, we see once that once someone was in India. Nowadays, of course, there are vacuums and everything, but in the generation in which I grew up, we use this broom to sweep in the room. And so in Mother's time, Holy Mother's time, someone was cleaning the room with a broom. And after the room was cleaned, they just threw the broom in the corner of the room. And then Mother says, no. She just notices, she calls that person and said, no, you pick up that broom. You can go and keep that broom in the corner, in a proper way. So, well, it's after all a broom. I can just fling it and throw it. And so this is the kind of attitude Holy Mother wanted us to develop. Can we even treat even a broomstick with respect? Take care of your car, your computer, everything. It's a whole new way of looking at life, looking at your possessions, looking at your family, looking at your friends. So if I am able to do that, then a real heart will be filled with love, and that love will go through God. So whatever work that we do, whatever relationships that we have, whatever responsibilities that we have, if all of those things are suffused, filled with the awareness that God is present in them, then it has become one-pointed. Then it has become an undivided devotion. So the idea is to, as much as possible, to try to see God everywhere. And we can begin seeing God everywhere. Haven't you seen this contradiction? We say God is everywhere, and the truth is we don't see God anywhere. How can God, who is everywhere, be not experienced anywhere? And a good way would be, while seeing God everywhere is an ideal we strive for, let us at least begin seeing God in one place. Because if I'm able to see God at least in one place, there is a chance that I might be able to then see God in 2 places or in 3 places. But you have to begin somewhere, and we have to begin with the first place. And for some of us, that first place where we might feel the presence of God may well be our place of worship, may well be the altar, may well be the divine in some form, a form with which we are able to relate immediately, a form that immediately reminds us of divinity. And that kind of a form which instinctively makes us realize that here is this divine being, here is this spirit, that becomes our chosen ideal. We call it Ishta. So we can at least begin by feeling the presence of God in one being, in one form, in one name. And if we can do that, then there is some hope that if I can do it in one place, in one form, I might be able to then extend that to 2 places, to 2 forms. So that's how we need to broaden our consciousness. And this idea then is concluded in this last verse of this chapter, verse 55. Mat karma krin mat paramo mad bhakta sangha varjitaha nirvaira sarva bhuteshu yassa mameti pandava. He who works for me, has me for the supreme goal, is devoted to me and non-attached, and bears no hatred towards any creature, he attains to me, O Pandava. And as we have seen in several places throughout the Gita, whenever Krishna refers to me, he is not referring to me as this historical Krishna. It's me meaning the spirit. All of these great ones, in Buddha's parables, in the parables that Jesus taught, whenever you find the pronoun me, I am the truth, I am the way, that I is that infinite spirit, that divine being. So here also when Krishna speaks of me, it doesn't mean Krishna, it means that infinite being. Because when Krishna said I, he didn't refer to his body and mind, he referred to his spirit. So that's what makes these great ones different from us. So he who works for me, so whatever work that we do in life, whether it's the work that earns you your livelihood, the work that you do for your family, for your friends, all of that work, if I can see that I'm really working out of love for God. There's that little book of Brother Lawrence called Practice of the Presence of God. I would encourage you to read it if you haven't seen it. In that he says that it's possible to reach a state. He worked most of his life in a kitchen. And he said it's possible that even lifting a spoon when you're cooking, that can be done out of love for God. And even lifting a spoon can become a worship. Even when you're stirring, even when you're cooking, that can become the highest worship. So whatever work we do, there is no high or low for work if you're working for God. Cleaning the toilet, sweeping, and running a kingdom, managing a whole neighborhood, or running a country, there is no difference at all, if I can do it as a worship of God. He who works for me, even no matter wherever you work, wherever you have a job, your boss might think that you are working for him or her, and they can remain in that illusion. You don't have to go and tell your boss, I'm really working for God. You don't have to do that. But deep down in your heart, you need to know, I'm not working for any human being. That whatever talents, knowledge that God has given me, in whichever situation God has placed me, I'm trying to use my knowledge, my talent in as best a way as possible. And I'm doing it out of love for God. That's the way a devotee thinks. Has me for the supreme goal. So oftentimes we say God is the master, we are the servant. Now, that's a good analogy, but the kind of master-servant relationship that we are familiar with, a servant does the master's work, but the servant doesn't see the master as the goal. The servant just sees this master pays me my salary and I'm doing the master's work. But when we see ourselves as servant of God, then we are not only doing God's work, but God is our supreme goal. If I'm doing God's work because God will keep on giving me some goodies, then it's like any of this kind of, it's like the work that you do and you are paid for it. So I'm doing this work for God and God pays me for it by giving me all wonderful things. That's not the highest ideal. Here, I'm doing God's work and God is my highest ideal. I don't need to receive anything from God because God itself, that's the problem when you speak about God. What are you going to say? God himself is a problem. God herself, again, is a problem to some people. So we never know. We just say God, that God's self maybe, is devoted to me. Again, if your whole body, mind, spirit, everything is focused toward God and non-attached. The only way to be non-attached is to be attached fully to God. The thing is this, we are so genetically programmed to be attached to something or the other. So if I'm attached to this, then I get detached from something else. Ramakrishna said it once, the more you go towards the east, the farther you will be from the west. And so the more I'm attached to material things, the farther I get away from spiritual things. And so non-attached really means, let me get attached to God, then I automatically become non-attached or detached from everything else. And bears no hatred towards any creature, very important. Sometimes people love God, but they hate everyone else. My love for God, someone asked, there was this great Sufi saint called Rabaya in present-day Iraq, I think. She was from a wonderful saint. So we read in her life that some angels came to her and she was in prayer. And then the angels, and she was a great saint, so the angels asked her, Rabaya, do you love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your everything? And she said, yes, I love God, all my heart. And said, Rabaya, do you hate the devil? Do you hate all this, everything else? And then she said, my love for God leaves me no time or place to hate anything. So even the notion of hatred should go away from our heart. As long as there is the least bit of hatred toward anything, we cannot realize God. So he who works for me, has me for the supreme goal, is devoted to me and non-attached, and bears no hatred towards any creature, he attains to me, O Pandava. In his commentary, Shankaracharya says, to the introduction to this verse, that this verse encapsulates the gist of some of the essential teachings of the Gita. So keep this verse in your mind, because it's really a wonderful summary of a lot of the things that we have read up to this point. So with this, we have come to the end of this 11th chapter. Do you have any questions or comments about what we have seen today? Okay, so when we begin next week, we will start with chapter 12. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. So this Sunday we will have Durga Puja, the worship of the Divine Mother at Durga, and the puja will begin at 10:30. And as usual, there will be music, there will be flower offering, there will be prasad. So all of you are welcome for the puja on Sunday. Because there is puja on Sunday, on Saturday we will not have meditation this week. Next week we'll have meditation as usual on Tuesday, and next Wednesday when we meet, we will begin chapter 12 of the Gita. We'll conclude now with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.